She handed me an eviction notice like it was a dinner invitation, smiled like she already owned my bloodline, and said, "72 hours, sweetheart. The bulldozers roll Monday." Behind her, 3 black SUVs idled on my gravel drive, and 2 men in designer jackets were already walking my fence line with surveying gear planting orange flags in the same meadow my grandfather used to ride at sunrise. I didn't even open the envelope at first because the real punch wasn't the paper. It was her last name, the name that should have been buried 15 years ago, the name I watched collapse in a federal courtroom. Ashworth, and now his daughter, was standing on my land, like the past had never happened. I'm not the kind of guy who panics, not anymore. I've done 22 years in federal investigations, the kind of work that teaches you to breathe slow when everything's on fire. But I'll tell you this, when Sterling Ashworth stepped closer in those expensive heels, sinking into my soft earth, her platinum blonde bob perfectly sharp, her powder blue suit looking ridiculous against Colorado wildflowers and snowcaps, and she said, "Progress redraws maps." Something cold moved through my chest. My hands were still dusty from driving nails into a fence post, the hammer still warm, and I just stared at her like she'd walked into the wrong dream. "You must be Cole Bradford," she said, like she'd practiced it in a mirror. I didn't correct her right away. I just watched the way she held that clipboard like a weapon, the way her sunglasses hid everything except that smug little curl in her mouth. "Eviction notice," she announced, tapping the white envelope against her palm. 72 hours to vacate. The county approved our expansion plan, and unfortunately for you, this little patch of nostalgia sits right in the middle of it. I finally said, "Those your people?" and nodded at the 2 guys measuring my land like they were picking out curtains. She didn't even flinch. "Summit Crest Estates surveyors," she replied. "We're updating property lines to reflect new zoning designations. I'm sure you understand." I laughed once dry short. "I understand they're trespassing." Her smile tightened like she wasn't used to hearing that word directed at her. "Mr. Bradford," she said, and her tone dropped into that sweet poison people like her use. "I think you'll find the boundaries have shifted somewhat since you last checked." Then she pulled out a thick stack of violation notices, 40-something pages, maybe more, and flipped them like she was doing a magic trick. Failure to maintain landscaping standards, unauthorized structures, improper fencing materials, noise complaints. The fines alone total $12,000. I stared at the numbers and felt my jaw set. "I've never been part of your HOA." Sterling leaned forward just a fraction, and even through the sunglasses I could feel her eyes. "The county expanded our jurisdiction last year," she said. "Your property now falls within Summit Crest oversight boundaries. Whether you signed up or not, you're subject to our standards." That was the moment I noticed the logo on her clipboard, blue and silver, a mountain peak with a stylized S through it, and my memory snapped back to a courtroom 15 years ago, to forged deeds and shell companies, to a man named Warren Ashworth swearing he owned land he'd never even stepped on. I'd dismantled his operation piece by piece. I'd watched a judge sign a judgment that said in black and white, this land was mine and no one else's. They told me Warren disappeared. They told me his empire collapsed. They told me it was over. Sterling Ashworth, standing in my meadow, told me they lied. She took off her sunglasses with this practiced little flourish and revealed eyes so icy they looked fake. "Sterling Ashworth," she said like it was a crown. "President of the Summit Crest Estates Homeowners Association. Welcome to the neighborhood neighbor." She said neighbor like an insult. Then she turned and walked back toward her SUVs, heels punching little holes into my grandfather's meadow, and I watched her go without moving because I was suddenly aware of something else, the steel frames on the ridge beyond my land, the skeleton of a development climbing out of the earth like bones through skin. They weren't just expanding near me, they were building a cage around me. That night I walked my fence line until the sun bled out behind the mountains. Every 30 feet I found a new survey stake, orange flags marking boundaries that didn't match any legal document I'd ever seen. And then I found it the part that made my stomach drop. Someone had moved my fence posts. Not by an inch, not by a sloppy mistake, but clean deliberate. 50 feet of my property, gone like it had never existed. I went straight to my equipment shed to check the security cameras because I don't play games. I found the wires cut clean. Professional work. Not teenagers, not vandals. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I stood there in the dark holding the cut cable in my hand, and for the first time since Sterling showed up, I felt something like fear, not because I thought she could beat me, but because I realized she wasn't operating alone. This was a system, a machine, and I was standing right under the gears. I called the one attorney I trusted, a man named Jack Harden, older, sharp, the kind of guy who'd fight a bear if you gave him a reason. He answered on the fourth ring voice, gravel and whiskey. "Cole," he said, "I was wondering when you'd come out of retirement." I didn't waste time. "She came," I told him. "Sterling Ashworth. Eviction notice. HOA violations. Claims the county expanded their jurisdiction over my land." There was a pause so long I could hear ice clinking in his glass. "Is this about the Ashworths?" he finally asked. "It is now." Another pause, heavier. "I can't help you," Jack said. I blinked like I'd misheard. "What, the Ashworths own half this county," he said low. "They've got commissioners in their pockets, judges at their dinner parties. Sterling rebuilt everything her father lost, and she did it smart this time. Legal, or legal enough that nobody wants to look too closely." My throat tightened. "So you're telling me there's no one willing to fight?" Jack exhaled like he hated himself. "I'm telling you, everyone who tried regretted it. Lawyers disbarred, businesses shut down, reputations destroyed. They don't just beat you in court, Cole. They erase you." The line went dead, and I stood alone in my kitchen staring out at the ridge where the steel frames were growing, the construction lights making the mountain look like it had a fever. And right then, I did something I hadn't done in years. I doubted myself. I sat at my table with that eviction notice unopened and thought, what if I'm the stubborn idiot? What if time changed things, and I didn't see it? What if some technical county statute really did swallow my land, and I'm just the old man yelling at modernity? I hated that thought. It tasted like rust. But it crawled into my head anyway because that's what power does. It makes you second-guess reality. I tried to sleep. Couldn't. Every time the wind hit the windows, I pictured Sterling's smile. In the morning, I drove to the county records office because if you want to beat a lie, you start with paper. The building smelled like old paper and older secrets. I walked up to the counter and asked for the original survey maps, parcels 7 through 12, Highland Ridge District, specifically the 1987 cadastral survey. The clerk was a young guy with nervous hands and a county polo shirt that didn't fit right. He typed, frowned, and then his face tightened like someone just stepped on his foot. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, "those records are currently unavailable." "Unavailable?" I repeated. He swallowed. "They're being updated. The originals have been pulled from public access pending verification." I leaned in, keeping my voice calm even though my pulse was climbing. "Those are public records. I have a legal right to view them." His eyes flicked over his shoulder like he expected someone to appear. "Maybe you could come back in a few weeks," he said, reading off a script he didn't even believe. I held his gaze until he cracked. "Who authorized the review?" I asked. "I'm not supposed to—" "The name," I said. "Please." He clicked through screens and the color drained out of him. "Authorization came from the county assessor's office," he whispered. "Signed by Tyler Ashford, another Ashworth." Of course. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back, and instead of going home, I drove 40 miles east to a diner outside county lines, the kind of place where people talk because they think no one important listens. That's where I met a county surveyor named Lena Cross. Late 30s, sharp eyes, tired posture, the look of someone who's been swallowing truth for years. She didn't shake my hand. She slid a manila envelope across the table like it weighed 100 pounds. "I can't be seen with you," she said. "If they find out I'm talking to you, I'll lose more than my job." "Then why are you here?" I asked. Lena stared at me like she was deciding whether I was worth the risk. "Because what they're doing isn't just illegal," she said quietly. "It's systematic. And I'm tired of pretending I don't see it." Inside the envelope was a handwritten note and a photo of a signature. Parcel 7B12, the note read. "Original survey does not match new survey." Lena tapped it with her finger. "The original 1987 survey shows your land extending 120 acres further east than current documents indicate," she said. 120 acres. Nearly a third of my property. Land my great-grandfather homesteaded in 1903. I felt my lungs tighten. Lena lowered her voice further. "They've been doing this for years. Small changes. 5 acres here, 10 acres there. Nobody notices because nobody checks the originals. And now the originals are conveniently unavailable." Then she slid the photograph toward me. "Close-up of a signature on an official authorization. Look at the name," she said. I looked. My skin went cold. "Warren Ashworth." "Warren's been dead 12 years, I said automatically. Lena's mouth didn't move much when she spoke. "Exactly," she whispered. "So someone is forging dead men's signatures on county documents. Someone with access to the assessor's office, the survey records, probably half the county." She stood up so fast the booth creaked. "I've told you everything I can," she said. "Don't contact me again. It's not safe." And then she was gone, the bell over the diner door chiming like a warning. I sat there with a forged signature in my hand and a realization settling into my bones. Sterling didn't just want my land. She wanted my history erased. 2 days later, she went further. I was replacing fence posts because apparently that's a crime now when a sheriff's cruiser rolled up my drive. 2 deputies stepped out, hands resting on their belts in that casual way that isn't casual at all. The lead deputy had a thick neck and a name tag that made my stomach twist. Ashworth. He unfolded a document like he was proud of it. "Cole Bradford," he said, "you're under arrest for criminal trespassing and interference with lawful surveying operations." I stared at him. "Trespassing on my own land." He didn't blink. "According to county records, this parcel is designated as transitional development property under Summit Crest jurisdiction. You've been observed interfering with authorized crews and removing boundary markers." I held my hands out, palms open, the way you do when you're trying not to get shot by bureaucracy. "I have a federal court judgment confirming my ownership," I said. "It's in my house, signed by a federal judge." Deputy Ashworth's face stayed flat. "That's for the courts to decide," he said. "Right now, you're coming with us." In the holding cell under fluorescent lights that made everything look sick that earlier, doubt came back heavier, meaner. Maybe Jack was right. Maybe you don't fight a system that's already decided you're wrong. Maybe you don't fight a family that can rewrite maps, cut camera wires, and put their own cousin in a badge. I sat there with my wrists aching and thought, is this it? Is this how it ends? Me labeled a trespasser on my own land while bulldozers chew through my grandfather's meadow. I felt something in me sag. For the first time I thought about walking away, selling whatever scraps they'd let me keep, leaving the mountains behind, and I hated myself for even considering it. But then I remembered my grandfather's voice. Land doesn't care who claims it. Land cares who fights for it. I asked for my one phone call, and I didn't waste it on local lawyers. I called a man named Corey Slade, FBI Denver, my old partner back when we dismantled Ashworth Development in the first place. He picked up like he'd been expecting me. "Cole," he said quiet, "I heard you're having trouble in Summit County." "They arrested me," I said, "for trespassing on my own land. The deputy who cuffed me is named Ashworth." There was a long exhale on the other end. Sterling's cousin Corey said, "She's placed family in key positions for years. Sheriff's Department Assessor's Office Commission. It's a network." My voice went tight. "Can you help me?" "I can't move without evidence," he said. "Federal-level evidence. Solid." I stared at the wall. "Then help me get it," I said. "Because she's not just taking my land. She's resurrecting an entire scheme we buried." Corey paused. "Get me the original case files," he said. United States versus Ashworth Development Corporation. Everything from 2010. When they released me, charges suspended, not dropped a warning, I drove straight to the county library because it had something the records office didn't access to federal archives. An older librarian with kind eyes helped me navigate, and then her brow furrowed. "That's odd," she said. "The summary indicates a sealed settlement." My stomach dropped. "It didn't settle," I told her. "It went to judgment." I pulled the folded paper from my back pocket, my copy of the federal judgment worn from 15 years of waiting. The librarian looked at the screen, then at the paper, and I watched understanding spread across her face. Someone altered federal documents. Someone reached back into history and tried to erase the fact that the Ashworths lost. And in that moment, the doubt evaporated. Not because I suddenly felt brave, but because I felt furious. You can threaten me, you can fine me, you can even arrest me on my own land, but you do not get to rewrite reality and expect me to politely disappear. I drove home, opened the safe beneath my floorboards, and pulled out the old folders. Interviews, financial records, photos of forged deeds, shell company registrations. Everything I used to burn Warren Ashworth to the ground. Sterling thought she was fighting a hermit with a fence post and a hammer. She didn't realize she'd just awakened the man who spent his life building cases. Over the next days, the puzzle pieces came fast. A washed-up former maintenance supervisor named Bruce Mallory, living in a trailer park, eyes haunted, recognized my name and let me in. She was there for all of it, he told me, voice shaking. Sterling. The meetings, the targets, the officials they bought. She wasn't watching. She was learning. He handed me a folder of copied transactions payments to county officials, shell company names. "Your land's the keystone," he said. "She's been buying everything around you for 15 years. Needs your parcel to connect it all for a massive development deal." Then the most unexpected crack in Sterling's wall walked into my life. Tyler Ashworth, the county assessor, young guilt-ridden, shaking hands. He asked to meet outside the county somewhere neutral, and when he arrived, he looked like a man who hadn't slept in months. "She made me alter records," he confessed. "Boundary revisions, authorizations. She told me it was correcting mistakes, but it was fabricating lines that never existed." He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and pressed it into my palm. "Everything's on there," he whispered. "Names, dates, amounts, every altered record." I stared at him. "Why are you doing this?" Tyler swallowed hard. "Because I can't live with myself," he said. "And because if I don't do something now, I'll never be able to look in a mirror again." When he left, I sat in my truck holding that flash drive like it was a grenade. Evidence was one thing. Getting it past Sterling's local chokehold was another. So I called Corey again. "I have what you need," I said. "But we're going to need more than surveillance. We need a full federal investigation." Corey's voice sharpened. "Tell me everything." I did. The forged signatures, the altered surveys, the HOA used as a front, the county officials paid to look away. The federal records mysteriously settled. When I finished, Corey let out a low whistle. "If this is real," he said, "we're looking at wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, potentially RICO if we can prove ongoing enterprise." "It's real," I said. "And she's pushing an annexation vote at a community meeting. She wants to force my land into HOA control on paper before anyone can stop her." Corey went quiet for a moment. "That's our window," he said. "We need her on record. A confession, an admission, anything that ties her directly. If she senses we're closing in, she'll burn evidence and disappear like her father." I stared at my hands on the steering wheel, feeling the old familiar calm settle over my anger. "Then I'll make her talk," I said. The night of the community meeting, the Summit Crest Community Center was packed 200 residents in folding chairs, faces curious, nervous, hungry for drama they didn't realize they'd be dragged into. Sterling stood at the front like a queen suit, pressed hair perfect again, that polished authority back in place. She clicked a remote and a map appeared on the projector. My property was highlighted in red, surrounded by Summit Crest blue, like an infection. "This parcel has been an obstacle to our expansion for too long," she said smoothly. "The owner has refused reasonable offers, ignored community standards, obstructed surveyors." She paused, letting the room lean in. "Tonight we vote to exercise our legal right to mandatory annexation under the county's Transitional Development Statute." Murmurs rippled. I sat in the back row, heart-steady hands quiet, watching her perform. Once annexed, she continued, "the property will be evaluated for compliance. Integrated into our master plan world-class golf course, luxury residential units increased property values by an estimated 40%. She smiled like she was selling salvation. "Any questions?" I stood up and the room shifted like a flock sensing a storm. "Yeah," I said. "I've got one, Sterling." Her smile faltered for half a second, just enough to show she knew my name now. "Mr. Bradford," she said, tone sharpening. "I'm surprised you decided to attend. I started walking down the aisle, slow, deliberate the way you walk when you don't plan to lose. I'm surprised you decided to push this vote," I said, "considering the federal investigation into your land acquisition practices." The room inhaled. Sterling's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. I pulled out copy survey discrepancies, the photo of Warren's signature, a printout showing the Federal Archive mismatch. "These are altered county records," I said, holding them up. "Boundary lines changed without authorization. Documents signed by Warren Ashworth, a man who has been dead for 12 years. Sterling's voice rose. "That's a lie. My father died 12 years ago. I have the death certificate. I couldn't help it." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You have a forged death certificate," I said, "filed to fraudulently claim an estate built on stolen property. And you've been using his signature like a rubber stamp to steal land from families across 4 counties. The crowd erupted confusion, anger, people turning to each other, whispers turning into shouts. Sterling's board members started backing away from her like she'd caught fire. "This is nonsense," Sterling screamed, trying to regain control. "This man is a disgruntled landowner making wild accusations to avoid legitimate proceedings." I held up the flash drive. "Then explain this," I said. "Every altered record, every forged authorization, every payment to county officials. Your own cousin handed it to me because he couldn't live with what you made him do." Sterling went pale, eyes darting calculating exits. And that's when the doors at the back opened. Corey Slade walked in first, FBI credentials, visible expression carved from stone. 2 agents behind him, then another. Sterling froze like her brain refused to accept the reality her money couldn't buy. Corey's voice cut through the chaos. "Sterling Ashworth," he said, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit property theft, and fraudulent filing of death certificates." The room went dead quiet for one beat, the way it does right before glass shatters. Sterling didn't remain silent. She screamed loud, raw, the mask finally cracking. "This land was supposed to be ours," she shrieked, hair coming loose, hands shaking as agents moved in. "My father built an empire, and this nobody destroyed it 15 years ago. I rebuilt everything. I will not let you take it again." Her voice broke on the last word, rage spilling out like oil. I stepped closer, close enough that only she could hear me over the roaring in her own head. "Your father built a fraud," I said quietly. "I made sure it couldn't stand then, and I'm making sure it can't stand now." The cuffs clicked around her wrists, and for the first time, Sterling Ashworth looked small, her perfect suit wrinkling her authority, draining away as agents guided her toward the door. She tried to twist, tried to fight, tried to throw one last look that promised revenge, but it was too late. The system she'd hacked was finally facing a system bigger than her. As she was dragged out, someone in the crowd started yelling questions: who else was involved, how long it had been going on, what this meant for their property values, and Sterling's face did something I'll never forget. It didn't look scared. It looked betrayed, like the world had broken a promise to her, like she honestly believed she had the right to rewrite maps and people and history, and we were the ones being unreasonable. The doors shut behind her, and the room was still in chaos. but my focus narrowed to one thing. Through the windows, out in the dark, beyond the parking lot lights, I could see the ridge where the steel frame stood. And for the first time since Sterling arrived on my land with that envelope, the frames didn't look like a cage. They looked like evidence temporarily doomed, waiting to be torn down. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just stood there, breathing slow, feeling the weight lift off my chest in a way that wasn't joy so much as relief sharpened into resolve. Because the truth is, I didn't win because I was stronger than Sterling. I won because I refused to accept her version of reality. And when powerful people try to bury the truth, they don't erase it. They only compress it, pack it down until the day it explodes. Some people build empires on stolen ground, and they think time makes it theirs. It doesn't. Time just makes the fall louder. The lesson is simple. Truth doesn't expire.